Well, we got another update on the Jalen Hurts concussion, and even though he hasn't hit the field yet, why is this medical expert telling everyone to relax? Plus, another potential Eagles playoff opponent is dealing with an injury. But which team would be better to face in the wildcard round, Washington or Green Bay? Meanwhile, what Zack Baun has done is crazy this season. Yet when you stack it up against the best of the best, it might be number one. So let's talk about why that is, how Fangio's defense should put your mind at ease, and all the other opportunities for Philly heading into Week 18. But first, let's run it. Alright, so the Eagles' playoff path is pretty clear at this point. And for those of you watching this weekend, if you want to play the Green Bay Packers in the wild card, then all that needs to happen is the Packers lose or the Washington Commanders win. Although for those of you wanting to play the Commies, then you just got to cheer for the reverse of that. Washington to lose to Dallas and Green Bay beat Chicago. However, if you want to boil it down to realistically what needs to happen, then I'd say just keep an eye out on the Commanders and Cowboys game. Because the Bears haven't won a true road game on Sunday since 2021. FYI, that's 20 straight Sunday games away from Soldier Field, which is unbelievably impressive because you'd think just somehow they could luck into a win at some point.
How hard can that be?
Okay, you're right. With what's happened in a couple games this season, it's fair to wonder if the football gods have just cursed the Bears for good. But considering that the Packers are 10-point favorites and still have a lot to play for, I highly doubt this is the time Chicago breaks that streak. Now, perhaps Dallas plays the spoiler, like they did play the Commies super close in their first matchup, with one of the wildest finishes leading to a Dallas win, yet they did have to work for everything until the final whistle. Either way, the Eagles are obviously in the much better spot being locked into the 2 seed. Of course, I know some of you would rather play the Packers and some of you would rather play the Commanders. Personally, I'm fine either way. Yes, I'm biased, but I genuinely believe the Birds will beat either side. Plus, like I mentioned on the last video, Green Bay will be without cornerback Jaire Alexander for the majority of the playoffs. And Washington's corner, Marshon Lattimore, continues to deal with a hamstring injury that's going to sideline him another week. Granted, I've seen all the pessimism and concern with Jalen Hurts missing another week of practice, but I'll get to that in a second. The beauty is that the Eagles have the opportunity to rest the majority of their starters and will most likely enter the wildcard matchup with all 22 guys on offense and defense healthy. Like, come on, how many teams, for one, can even say that, but also just have the luxury to do that? Heck, even the 14-2 Detroit Lions and Minnesota Vikings are about to play a game with a playoff atmosphere, intensity, and physicality that's bound to leave a toll on the ends up as the 5 seed. Which is why I can't blame Philly for taking advantage of the rest. Because what's more dangerous than a fresh Saquon Barkley behind the best offensive line in the league that's also healthy? By the way, speaking of taking advantage, you've got to take advantage of these insane incentives going around the league with Underdog. Just make sure to scan the QR code and use my code PHILLYSPECIAL when you sign up to get up to $1,000 in bonus cash. Now I get it, why on earth would I be placing a bet this late in the season with unknowns around who's playing and how long teams are going to roll with the starters? However, this is contract incentive week where you can take advantage of this serious edge. For example, Mike Evans just needs 5 catches and 85 yards to earn a $3 million contract bonus. Plus, Evans is fighting to keep history alive since those 85 yards would mark his 11th straight 1,000-yard season. And in case you haven't been following, the Bucs' entire team this week have been saying they're aware of the record and are going to try to make it happen for Mike. Although as much of a lock as that is, the guy with the most escalators in play this week is Geno Smith, as the Seattle quarterback has a whopping $6 million on the line, via a combination of 185 passing yards and hitting at least the 69.7% completion percentage versus LA. The other one to keep an eye out for is Denver's Courtland Sutton, since the Broncos need a win to get into the playoffs. And if Sutton can hit another 82 receiving yards, then he'll kick in a $2 million contract bonus. Now, I considered taking J.K. Dobbins as well, who only needs 58 rushing yards to get another $150,000, but those 3 are my favorite. So there you go. My plays for the 5 times multiplier are Mike Evans over 84 receiving yards, Geno Smith to throw for at least 220 passing yards, and Courtland Sutton to get at least 80 receiving yards. Again, for those with the pick'em games available to you, just make sure to scan the QR code and sign up with my code PHILLYSPECIAL. Also, for those of you who do sign up, right now you can get a free special play in the lobby for this weekend along with that $1,000 in bonus cash. So what are you waiting for? The playoffs are right around the corner and there's not a better time to join the best option in fantasy sports. Scan the QR code, use code PHILLYSPECIAL, or just click the link in the description to sign up today. By the way, while those other 3 guys are fighting to get some contract multipliers, Zack Baun already got an additional $500,000 thanks to making the Pro Bowl. And not gonna lie, but his response was pretty awesome.
A huge honor, something that you think about, and honestly something that was in my contract when I signed here, and I just kind of laughed at the fact that incentive was in my contract because I didn't think that was necessarily a goal of mine. Obviously it's a goal of mine, but I didn't think I could reach it at this point in my career. But to be able to be voted by fans, players around the league, and coaches, it really means a lot to me and a lot to the guys on this defense. It just shows that what this defense is and the type of guys we have.
Worry about sometimes is, you are a free agent this offseason. I know it's a big picture question, but is it as simple as like you love it here, you're playing great football, and you want to come back next season if it all works out?
Yeah, I mean, if it all works out, and obviously that's things that are out of my control and in the hands of people above me, but I love it here. I love the guys in this locker room. I love the organization. I hope it all works out.
How we get it done. I mean, this is the first inside linebacker for the Eagles that's made the Pro Bowl since 2006. Like, that was Jeremiah Trotter Sr. nearly 20 years ago the last time that happened. Plus, Baun is the first linebacker in NFL history to have over 150 tackles and 5+ forced fumbles in a single season, which really just speaks for itself. But honestly, if he was a bigger household name, Defensive Player of the Year would be a shoo-in.
He's filled up a stat sheet, and one of those stats is just forced fumbles, and he just has a knack for it. Here's Kasicki catching this little stick route, and here he comes. Like Nakobe Dean puts his head in there, and here comes Zack Baun. Ball's out, and Dean recovers it. In a tight game, Eagles get the ball back. All right, now you watch him here against Dallas. All right, here he is at the middle linebacker spot. Zeke is going in to take a 10-7 lead for the Cowboys late in the second quarter, except here's Baun fighting off the block, and here he is, putting that helmet right on the ball, and Cooper DeJean recovers it in the end zone. All right, Cowboys going to get smoked in the game. And then you watch right here. Here he is in man coverage on Jake Ferguson. All right, so Jake Ferguson, little hit, late release right here, and here he comes. Hat right on the ball. Kind of just what you want all you guys to do in Reed Blankenship with the recover. All right, now you go to here. You go against Baltimore. Here's Lamar on 3rd and 2 right here. And all he's doing is just keeping his eye right here, playing off Ronnie Stanley, and he pops that ball loose right there, and the ball's out. Now, that's the only one that the Eagles didn't recover. Ronnie Stanley got on it. And then let's just go to this Washington game. Here he is out here. Jaden Daniels is going to throw this little hit screen on the outside to De'Ami Brown, and here he comes, like a bat out of hell. Bam, ball's out. Right there. Nolan Smith trailing, recovers. Zack Baun has filled up a stat sheet in every category. But 5 forced fumbles from your middle linebacker, that's a great stat. Great player. Maybe the Defensive Player of the Year.
And he should be, but also a ton of credit to Vic Fangio, because the DC saw this from a mile away and combined Baun with all the other changes, and Fangio took a squad that was 26th in yards per game allowed, 28th in defensive efficiency, 29th in EPA per play, 30th in points per game allowed, 30th in passing yards per game allowed, and 30th in EPA per rush, to then in just one season going to 1st in yards per game allowed, 1st in defensive efficiency, passing yards per game allowed, EPA per play, and 3rd in points per game allowed. Like, come on, that's just insane. Also, for those not entirely sure, defensive efficiency takes into account the strength of schedule, so going from 28th to 1st is just absolutely ridiculous. Which is why, even for some of you concerned about Jalen Hurts still being out or rusty once he does finally return, this defense has proven to be the great equalizer. Still, I get it. Is not seeing Jalen Hurts get a single practice for 2 straight weeks slightly concerning? Maybe so. Because per the concussion protocol, the 5 steps are rest, aerobic exercise, football-specific drills, non-contact training, and then clearance for full football activity. And when you think about the fact that we haven't even seen Jalen at step 3 for football-specific drills, it has naturally led to some panic.
We're doomed.
Hold on, we are not doomed. The Eagles are just playing this thing smart, much like the Saquon Barkley situation. Although yes, he did practice on Friday, but my personal opinion is that it was to get some reps and not that he's actually playing Sunday. On the flip side, the argument continues to be that Jalen sitting out for nearly a month is going to be too long and that he'll be sluggish for the opening playoff game. And while that may be true in some instances, we've also seen guys like Tua in Miami who sat out for over a month and a half before returning and played well in his first game back. So I'm with those saying it's a smart decision.
This is Dr. David Chow at Sports Injury Central. We're not worried. The belief is Hurts is fine and could play, but the Eagles are playing it smart. Why? If he were to get a second concussion within a week or two, that would put him out for a month, meaning essentially all of the playoffs. They were smart in week 17. They'll be smart in week 18. Heck, in fact, that's why they're resting Saquon Barkley. Let's say there's a 5% chance of injury where you miss the next week or 2. Why risk that for Saquon or Jalen Hurts in this meaningless game?
I know it's a polarizing topic, but I think at least one thing that we can agree on is that it'll be really nice to see Tanner McKee play this weekend, especially with Kenny Pickett also not at practice, and the Mormon Missile is relishing the opportunity.
Absolutely. I mean, this is my chance to, play a significant amount of snaps, reps, and to go out and show what I've been working for all this whole year. Obviously I've been putting in a ton of work by myself, on the practice field and different things like that. So I feel like I can showcase that. I'm super excited for the opportunity.
It's kind of nice to have a relaxing game this weekend that doesn't really matter too much and see the guys who have an opportunity to do something and contribute. And seeing as though there'll be a few different guys stepping up, I figured let's talk to a guy who'll be covering the game in the press box this weekend, and Eagles writer Anthony DiBona. Jalen Hurts and still in the concussion protocol. There's been a lot of concern, a little bit of freak out, surprise, surprise, that, emotions are high with your starting quarterback and still not practicing. But to the level of extreme that some people are taking this thing, because I polled the audience and asked on my recent live stream, was like, hey, scale of 1 to 10, where do you fall, right? Like a 1 is who really cares, no big deal. A 10 is we're going to lose the opening round game because Jalen Hurts is injured right now, and who knows, is he going to play? I don't know, but he's injured and all this other stuff. So there's been all ends of the spectrum here, but to be able to get, people a little bit relaxed, calm on this side, there's another week coming. Is it a big concern for Jalen Hurts, the fact that he has not practiced yet and is still in concussion protocol?
I mean, it would have been great to see him have like a limited participation in this final week, the final practice this week. So it kind of eases the concern a little bit because everybody's like, he's not advancing at all. Like he's not practicing. He needs to practice before he gets cleared and all that, which I understand. I get it. He's the number one quarterback in Philadelphia, and if he's not playing, then it's hard to envision them really doing much in the playoffs. But at the same time, I feel like Nick Sirianni especially, he loves kind of playing things close to the vest and gamesmanship and kind of keeping other teams on their toes. So the fact that they have the ability to kind of take this a little bit slowly and not have to rush him through the protocol, whereas now whoever they are playing, whether it's the Packers or the Commanders in the playoffs, now they do have to maybe watch some Kenny Pickett or Tanner McKee and think, hey, maybe Jalen Hurts early isn't going to play. I mean, granted, there's not a ton of tape on them and they might not take a ton of time to do that, but the fact that they even have to think about it gives the Eagles a slight advantage. But at the same time, I still don't think there's much concern about Jalen Hurts, because if this game was meaningful, I think he'd probably be able to play. The fact that he was at the facility bringing the golf carts for the offensive linemen, they showed him in that video. The fact that Jeff McClain said he is in the facility, so it's not like he's sitting in a dark room at his house. He can't be on any electronics, and like he's really, really at the early stage of this thing. But it seems like if they needed him to play, he probably could play, but maybe they are playing it a little bit slow in my opinion. I think that's what they're doing. So if it's this time next week and he's obviously hasn't played or practiced, then I'll be concerned. But as long as we get to Wednesday and we see that limited participation next to his name, I feel like the Eagles will be in good shape, and I think Jalen Hurts will be just fine for the opening round of the playoffs.
That's fair. And yes, you say, like competitive advantage that Nick Sirianni loves to hold over people. Sometimes it is meaningful. Other times it's like, what are you doing? Everyone realizes what's going to take place. But to the standpoint of, and I saw this from a lot of different others, ProFootballDoc also posted a video of this, which I included, and it's just kind of taking the same mindset of, look, the Eagles are slow playing this. Everybody can relax. It's okay. As you said, if Jalen really needed to play here, there'd probably be an extra push. Let's see if we can get him ready a little bit quicker. But on the other side of it, I mean, obviously concussions are no joke and nothing to play around with. But if Jalen were to rush back a little bit too early and then all of a sudden, take a hit and, just have a, I guess, recurring injury of the concussion or something that's a little bit offsetting, then all of a sudden you could literally be looking at where he's out for a month and he's out for the entire playoffs, basically. So, it's like, yes, I get it. I'm with you also. I'm with a lot of those people. It's like, would it be better to see Jalen? For sure. Would it be better always to see your quarterback out there 100%? Yes. But at the end of the day, Jalen's going to be fine. We're not 2-game week yet. He's got plenty of time to clear the protocol. He's got the 5 steps, which technically, I guess if you're reading between the lines, he's somewhere around step 3. So, he'll get an opportunity if they practice on Tuesday, or even if they're in the facility, potentially maybe to get something happening. And then Wednesday, I'm feeling like by Thursday, you're going to get at least a limited practice, but I'm thinking maybe even a full practice by that point, and then, you just move on beyond. So, yeah, I agree with you. Not a whole lot of rust or not a lot of concern. I will say on the other part of that, though, that rust bit is thrown out, because it's like whenever Jalen takes that first snap in the playoff game, it'll be close to 1 month. I mean, if you go between the duration of when he suffered the concussion to that playoff game, it'll at least be 3 to 4 weeks, but if not almost a month. And so, the natural inclination is you've seen quarterbacks at times, whether it's an intentional rest or an unintentional rest, that there's something there that maybe is rust or sluggish start or whatever we want to call it. Is there any concerns on your side there that, maybe we don't see a Jalen Hurts that we might want to see early on in the playoff game based on the fact that he's had to be held out?
So I saw a lot of people respond to like my tweets because I've been talking about this on Twitter a lot. It's kind of been the hot topic in Philadelphia. So I dove into Jalen Hurts' career, and he's played 8 games where he's had at least 1 week of rest where he didn't play the previous week. And the Eagles in those games are 6-2. So they've been able to win 75% of those games, which is pretty damn good. And the only 2 losses, unfortunately, they were both in the playoffs, but one of them was his very first playoff game against the Buccaneers, which obviously it was his first test in the playoffs. Todd Bowles kind of threw the kitchen sink at him, and we saw how he handled that. But the other loss was literally in the Super Bowl against Patrick Mahomes, where you can make the argument that he actually outplayed Patrick Mahomes in that game. So besides that one fumble. So, I mean, you could say that he'll be rusty, but history shows that Jalen Hurts plays pretty well in these games. Eagles are 6-2. He has 11 passing touchdowns to just 5 interceptions, and he's also added 8 rushing touchdowns on the ground in those games as well. So overall, just looking at him as a whole, I see a lot of people saying, oh, well, if he's limited to start the week, then he's not getting a full practice. But, I mean, the guy's played almost 5,000 snaps as a starting quarterback. I really don't think they're going through a vigorous practice where he's not going to know what's going on. He's not going to be able to catch up on what's going on. Like, he's been there, done that at pretty much this point in his career. So I wouldn't panic too much. I mean, like we said, if he's not practicing by Wednesday or Thursday in any capacity, then obviously that'll be a reason to be concerned. But until that happens, I think it'll be just fine for Jalen Hurts and the Eagles in the first round of the playoffs.
You mean Kellen Moore's not installing like a new wrinkle in the
Nope.
offense or anything this late in the year? Jalen's going to miss some time. It'll be very important. So
Yeah, I mean, that stuff it's driving me crazy where people are like really getting upset that he might be limited to start next week. I'm like, what do you think they're doing in practice at this point? Really, throughout the entire regular season, they're basically just doing like these walkthrough drills. They're not going super fast, especially with quarterbacks. So, I mean, just take it easy. I think he'll be just fine, and people need to pump the brakes a little bit with the panic.
good. Okay. Well, it comes at the perfect time because, yes, that's been the talk of the town. Everybody's mentioning it. Understandably so, yes, because it's QB1. Everybody cares. But it's what everyone needs to hear. It's like, look, he's going to be all right. I love the record. It's a perfect point as well. I mean, you know, Chris Jones said he's never seen a guy, certainly played against one, but certainly seen a guy play that level in a Super Bowl before. So we all saw what Jalen did. And you know, stats are only so far that you want to take them, but at the same time, it's like, look, it's his first playoff game. There's a difference there. Being 6-2, Jalen's a winner. He's going to do whatever it takes. If he's a little bit less than ideal throwing the football, the Eagles, regardless of if it's the Packers or the Commanders, in my opinion, and I think a lot of people's opinion, is like, look, they're going to be more than enough. They had the number one defense in the NFL. It's going to be more than enough. They know what to do to get ready. So we can pump the brakes. It's going to be fine. And to the same point of that, it's Saquon Barkley is going to be fine even if you rest him, because there's some people out there, and this just behooves me to think this, but there's some people out there that are like, oh, but if we rest him, then he's going to be sluggish coming out for this game, and or the mindset of that you're not going after the record, so somehow this is Sirianni's fault before we've even gotten there, which is, you know, glorious, but it's Sirianni's fault because he's crushing the morale of this locker room. Do you buy any of that at all, that Saquon Barkley is sitting out, this morale is going to be just tarnished before we even get to the playoffs?
Absolutely not. I mean, just look at how Saquon Barkley handled New York and what he dealt with there. I mean, if he was going to lose his morale, it would have been in New York, and we saw he handled that like a professional. Now we see how he's handling this. I mean, he looked a little bit disappointed that he is going to sit out, but at the same time, he understands that, in the words of Jalen Hurts, you got to keep the main thing. And they know when this whole thing started in week one and even in the preseason that once they assigned Saquon Barkley and they kind of assembled the Avengers, that it was pretty much Super Bowl or bust in Philadelphia. It's been that way for a couple of years, ever since they went there 2 seasons ago. So the fact that, and I tweeted about this as well, is just like, all of a sudden when they sat the team down and they announced that the starters weren't going to play, that people were like, oh, well, you better win the Super Bowl now. Like, no, it's been that way. That's been the expectation. And I think anything short of at least a trip to the NFC Championship game is probably going to be viewed as a disappointment. So, I mean, this has been the level that they had as far as expectation goes for the entire season. It has nothing to do with this record and them deciding not to go for it. But at the same time, you have to realize that if you do put out Saquon Barkley there, you can't just have him go out there by himself without the starting offensive line. And then you're risking putting a guy like Lane Johnson, Cam Jurgens, who has over 1,000 snaps played this season. Like, you don't really want to, like, I understand the record would live on forever and it'll be Saquon Barkley's name in the record books. That's all fair and well. I understand that 100%. But at the same time, if somebody gets hurt, whether it's Saquon himself or one of these offensive linemen, that can really cripple the Eagles in the playoffs, especially Saquon Barkley. So I know that the record means a lot, but in the grand scheme of things, and the Super Bowl is really what matters and what this team has been working for the entire season. And Saquon Barkley even said it himself, where he was like, do I want it for myself? Yes, but at the same time, if one of the other players got hurt, like, he would feel terrible about that. So Nick Sirianni had to make the tough decision, but I think it was the right decision all along. And also, 101 rushing yards wasn't never a guarantee anyway. I mean, granted, against the Giants without Dexter Lawrence, it probably would happen. But at the same time, in 4 games this season, Saquon Barkley didn't hit that mark. So you have to think if the Eagles did put their starters on the field, the Giants knew damn well that it was kind of a slap in the face because they knew why they were going to be on the field. So I'm sure if I was the Giants, I'd say, hey, listen, all 11 defenders play the run. If they want to throw for 1,000 yards in a game, let them throw for 1,000 yards. We are not giving Saquon Barkley his record. So if I was Brian Dable, that's what I would do. But yeah, I think that Nick Sirianni at the end of the day made the tough decision, but it was the right decision.
It is a fair point also, because it's like, if they want to pass for 1,000 yards, like you say, New York should not be trying to win this game. Like, they already ruined it last week against the Colts, but like, they should not be trying to win any more games. So, yeah, if they had put Saquon out there, it's fair. Like, you know, do they go all out and make sure that he does not get the record? Because you don't want to be the team, obviously, that happened on, especially with it being all the other storylines of, oh yeah, by the way, this is a guy that we used to have, and he's going to break it against the former team, John Mara and Joe Shane, and all the other slap in the face that he would get. So it does feel like, yes, if you wanted to absolutely force it, you and I would both agree Saquon was probably going to get that record, but still, the higher-ups, Jeffrey Lurie, Howie Roseman, the powers that be, clearly had a conversation along with the team and Nick Sirianni and everything else, and basically the thought was, look, why risk it, right? Like, there's a legacy, yes, but why risk it? You have enough of a buy-in. The team are professionals. They're totally behind this thing, and there's not any I'm not buying any of this whole, like, it kills the morale. The squad's not going to be showing up in any way. Like, look, if anything, they're going to be hungrier. They're going to be healthier. You mentioned this. I saw a tweet about it, but it's like, how many teams can go into the playoffs and you see that they, I mean, legitimately have a chance of having all 22 starters, like offense and defense, all 22 starters healthy, ready to go for round one of the playoffs. I mean, that's unheard of. It's ridiculous. But the benefit obviously speaks for itself, but especially, you know, going up against maybe a Packers team, maybe a Commanders team, they're dealing with injuries. It's priceless to have that.
I mean, if you look around the NFC as a whole, it just seems like the Eagles, that's one of the advantages that they have right now, is how healthy they are. I mean, granted, outside of maybe Brandon Graham, who wasn't really much of a starter. I mean, he played a role, but he technically wasn't a starter. I think Josh Sweat and Nolan Smith kind of grew into those roles and kind of held them down. So now you have a healthy Bryce Huff to add as well, and Jalix Hunt coming along on the edge. So just, if you look at, like, before the season started, your projected starters on both sides of the ball are healthy right now, which basically no other team in the NFC can say. I don't know about the AFC as much, but you look at the Packers, who they might play. They just announced that Jaire Alexander is probably going to be done for the season. The Vikings, they replaced Christian Darrisaw, but they did lose him early in the season. That was their starting left tackle. The Lions have dealt with more injuries than anybody else in the NFL, with no Aiden Hutchinson, Aleem McNeil, David Montgomery, among countless others. The Buccaneers lost Chris Godwin. The Commanders don't have Austin Eckler. The Rams are missing a few defensive starters. So, I mean, you look at the NFC as a whole, the Eagles are in the best, like, health standpoint of all of them. So why would you risk that in Week 18, putting any of these meaningful players out there? So they're doing the right thing, and it seems like going into the playoffs, they're positioned better than anybody else as far as from a health standpoint.
Totally agree. And I know that we're going to get a lot of comments of people that disagree. It is perfectly understandable. Completely. We get it. The whole legacy part, Saquon history, may never have someone to break it again, certainly in our lifetime, like it's 50-year-old record, all that other stuff. So we can agree to disagree respectfully for those that are of that mindset. And I get it on both sides. I mean, I said this beforehand. If the Eagles had come out and said, hey, we're starting Saquon, I would have been okay with it. Like, maybe necessarily wouldn't have agreed with it. I'd been like, maybe you want to rest him. But at the same time, I'd be like, fine. You know what? Go out there, get the record. Yes, I'm going to be hoping that everyone stays healthy, but you make that decision. The team wants to go get it. Sure. Go get the record, make it happen. They just did not choose to do that. And so there you go. You move on. The squad is healthy. When we talk about the Commanders and the Packers, though, curious your thoughts on this, because I gotten a lot of questions on this side as well. But should we be rooting one way or the other? It is likely that the Packers are the opponent, but if the Packers were to win and the Commanders were to lose against Dallas, then, all of a sudden you would flip and the Eagles would be playing the Commanders again. So is there one over the other? Who should we be rooting for? Any preference even at all? What do you think?
I think it's going to be a tough matchup regardless. I think the Commanders are a pretty damn good team, and the Packers, I think, if they did have Jaire Alexander, I think they were still one of the best teams in the NFC as a whole. So I think Matt LaFleur is a hell of a head coach as far as his play calling and being able to scheme things up. We saw how closely they played the Eagles in the first week, but now you take out Jaire Alexander for them, and the Eagles weren't utilizing Cooper DeJean in that first matchup that they played against, and sure enough, the Packers kind of ate the Eagles up in the slot. So I think it would be interesting to see them kind of run it back, and like you said, that seems like the more likely matchup. I think the Packers would be the tougher team to play at this point, so maybe you hope that the Commanders can kind of fall down to that 7th spot and play the Eagles, but at the same time, Jaden Daniels does some ridiculous things, and it seems like they always pull off some type of magic whenever he's in there. We saw the 4th down conversions against the Eagles, and it seems like just when you get him, you don't get him, and then he escapes or he makes a play with his legs. It's just he's such a talented player that I feel like regardless of what else is going on in Washington, the fact that he can kind of take the game over by himself is something that you have to worry about, especially in those just single elimination games where everything is on the line, and he seems like he can just take over, especially in those big moments. So I think the Packers is obviously like the likeliest matchup, but it's going to be the tougher one. But I think the Eagles can win either one. And I think, like we pointed out to their health before, I think that really gives them an advantage over either one of those opponents.
Totally agree. With that, the health and everything else as well. You mentioned it in the article, which I've got a link for those wanting to take a look. Follow Anthony DiBona at DiBona NFL. But expectations for the playoffs, considering where the Eagles are at, obviously, but I mean, it feels like anything, as you mentioned, short of an NFC Championship berth is I guess, a failure. We'd probably go that far. There's been some speculation. I don't know if I necessarily buy into it, but if Sirianni and the squad were to suffer a first-round defeat, he's on the hot seat. Jeremy Fowler saying that there's, I guess, some that believe that around the league. Where are you at with this? Yes, it would feel like anything maybe short of the NFC Championship, but is Sirianni on the hot seat? Do you buy into that report at all? Thoughts on that side?
Well, I think things were a little bit too quiet in Philadelphia, so they needed to kind of throw somebody's name in a report to kind of drum up some nonsense. But, I mean, if they do lose in the first round, you also have to look at it where I tweeted it out as well, that this is going to be the first time, well, likely the first time if it does happen, that a 7th seed, since the NFL added the 7th seed in 2020, that they're going to have at least 12 wins, which is just insane. So there's a very good chance that both the Commanders and the Packers end up with 12 wins. And if that's the case, the Eagles will be hosting a 12-win team in the first round of the playoffs, which just sounds crazy to even say. So, I mean, if they do lose, obviously it'll be disappointing. But at the same time, this NFC is just stacked this year. And if they do kind of lose on like a fluky play or whatnot, I know people are going to call for Sirianni's job. But if you kind of just zoom out and see like his record as a whole and the fact that he's kind of guided the team through like chaos and all these different things at times, I think they would still keep him around. Jeffrey Lurie kept Andy Reid all those years when they were losing in the conference championship game and things like that. I don't think he would be so quick to dump Nick Sirianni. But at the same time, with how loaded and how healthy this roster is, I personally think anything short of the NFC championship game would be a failure. But like I said, just considering how stacked this NFC is, it's going to be a tough road. We started talking about it before we started recording, but there's a very good chance that they can play a 12-win team in the first round. If they win that one, there's a chance that the 5 seed, if they have to play them, could be the loser of that Lions-Vikings game. So that could be a 14-win team there. Then if you get over that hurdle, you could be playing the winner of that Lions-Vikings game, and they could be a 15-win team. So just that road to potentially the Super Bowl or even the conference championship game, it's unlike anything we've seen in the past. And the Eagles have a tough road ahead of them, but I do think they can get it done.
And we also mentioned, too, if you go to the Super Bowl, then, if it's the Chiefs, then you're another 15-win team, or maybe 16. Do they surprise and upset the Broncos this week? I guess we'll see. It's wild. The fact that there's so many different scenarios, I'm going to continue to root for, as understandably I think a lot of people will, but there's a path for the Eagles to host the NFC Championship game, and actually a very realistic path in my opinion, because if the Eagles, obviously win the first game against the Packers, you have the 5 seed playing the 4 seed, so if it's Minnesota or Detroit, one of them winning and beating out, I guess it could be a different standpoint here, but let's just say it's one of those that beats whoever the 4 seed is, maybe the Rams. Then all of a sudden, Eagles possibly hosting the Bucks, and then you have a rematch from this Week 18 matchup. This time, the 5 seed, whoever that is, the Vikings or the Lions, wins that game. All of a sudden, if Philly beats Tampa, then Philly's hosting the NFC Championship game. It'd be great. It'd be phenomenal. So that's what I'm cheering for.
I just felt like Zach Galifianakis in Hangover when he's got all those numbers going across, and you're reading across the 5 beats the 4.
Different things going. Yeah. That is what it is. This time of year, at this point, it's all hypotheticals. It's all guesswork. But that's the beauty of it. Why we're super hyped, the pump, the getting ready for it, because we're so close, and it's crazy that the season is just about done and we're almost into the playoffs. But it's set up better than what I think anybody would imagine. Even with the difficult path, it's just like you look at this team, what they've done, what they can accomplish, all the potential. It's right there in front of them. And it's really cool, too, like an icing on the cake for you, because you're going to be at the game, as I mentioned on the live stream, credentialed media member, Anthony DiBona. And congrats to you, sir, but you'll be able to cover the team, get to ask some questions, some other insight there. Granted, it probably be a little bit more cool if Saquon was playing and they're covering it for that reason, but there's still some other storylines. So I'm curious, what are you most looking forward to? We've texted about it, offline, but for those in the know, or for those to get those people in the know, what are you most looking forward to being at the game, covering the game, press conferences, interviews, everything there?
Well, first, I just want to thank Philly Sports Network, because they're the ones giving me the opportunity to do this. I don't want to get too emotional, but it's been a long road to get to this point. So the fact that I'm covering the Eagles and I'll be credentialed in the press box and rubbing elbows with all these guys that I've looked up to for years, I feel like I'm getting choked up just talking about it. But yeah, it's going to be a big deal, even though it's a meaningless game. It's going to be a meaningful game for me. But like you said, it's still people are labeling it as a meaningless game, but there's still going to be a lot of guys playing for potentially roles next season. I've highlighted on Twitter, but guys in particular that I'll be watching for, you got Trevor Keegan and Tyler Steen, who will probably be starting at guard, is what I would assume the Eagles are going to do. And given the fact that Mekhi Becton is going to be heading into free agency, who knows what they'll do there. I think he'll come back, because it seems like he just has such an attachment to this team, and he's so grateful for Jeff Stoutland in the room in Philadelphia. So maybe he does return, but if he doesn't return, this is kind of the chance for Keegan and Steen to kind of audition for that spot potentially in the future. We've seen Tyler Steen step in at multiple points this season and play well at guard, so this is going to be a big moment for him. And then on the other side of the ball, you got Moro Ajomo and Thomas Booker, and maybe even your boy Gabe Hall if he gets elevated from the practice squad, where they'll be playing along the defensive line and getting some snaps there, because Milton Williams is another guy who's going to be set for a huge payday in free agency. And I don't know if he'll come back. Maybe he'll get a Javon Hargrave type of offer and move on in free agency. And if the Eagles have to replace him, then this gives these guys a chance to kind of audition for that spot as well. So there's other storylines as well. Obviously, like you said, if they were pursuing the rushing record, that would have been the main topic. But these guys, it's a glorified preseason game at the end of the day, but a lot of these guys are competing for jobs, whether it's for the Eagles, for the Giants, or for the other 30 teams in the NFL. So I kind of enjoy games like this because I'm a weirdo, but I love stuff like this, and I'm excited to actually be there in person for the first time. It's going to be a really fun experience.
Well, it is totally well-deserved. I know that I speak for a ton of people, everyone in the comment section, everything else, but completely well-deserved. For those watching, again, you can follow along. Just make sure to follow. You're probably already doing it, but if you're not, just make sure to follow at DiBona NFL, all the insights, tweets, articles, everything else coming away from Sunday's game. So getting you ready for the playoffs, moving beyond. As always, we should wrap up because there's still people that are crazies out there. If you're at this point, though, of curious of what we're going to pick on this side, then you are a little bit odd. I'm just going to say that. Just no offense, but the score predictions, first touchdown score, we've done it for every game, just about minus, sickness or kid schedules or whatever, but just about every single game. So still going to keep it up. A little bit more meaningless, as we've alluded to, but having been the spread, I believe, 2.5 for Philly, And I think the total is like somewhere around 37. But I guess first off, score predictions, and then we will get into first touchdown score pick as well.
So, I mean, this might be a good thing for Eagles fans, but I have the Giants actually winning this game 27-24. I mean, like you mentioned, who knows who's even going to be out there, but I think the Giants, we saw what they did to the Colts last week out of nowhere. It seemed like they were kind of rolled over and dead, but they, for some reason, dropped 40-plus points on the Colts and knocked the Colts out of playoff contention. So if they want to, for some reason, prove something in a way against the Eagles, then this will be their chance to do it. And I just feel like they might be able to out-talent the Eagles based on they'll probably be using their starters. It seems like guys like Malik Neighbors, Tyrone Tracy, Drew Lock played out of his mind last week. It seems like they're going to be using a lot of their starters, so I'm going to give them the edge in this game. It might be close, but I think the Giants will pull it out and ruin their draft positioning even further, which would be a benefit to the Eagles and kind of keeping another potential franchise quarterback out of the division.
That'd be fantastic. We would all love it for that reason. So it'd be the only time, I guess, to pick in a benefit for the Eagles to lose. But I'm of the same mindset. I think that it's going to be a very close game. I do think the Giants win. I'm a little bit lower scoring. I'm probably going to go with like a 24. I went back and forth with like a 24-21, 24-20. I'll officially go with a. I want some Jake Elliott field. I would say 24-20. We'll go with that score, and the Giants win, hurt themselves from that side. So, lastly, first touchdown score. We didn't get it for the first time in like 4 or 5 weeks last week, unfortunately, but we could restart the streak here. So, first touchdown score. Who you got?
I mean, I think this is probably the safest and probably the one with the worst odds, I guess, in a way, but I'm going to go Malik Neighbors for the first touchdown. He had 2 touchdowns last week, had a huge game last week. He has 3 touchdowns over their last 3 games. So I think he kind of takes advantage of the Eagles' backup quarterbacks that will be out there. And it seems like him and Drew Lock have a good connection. So unfortunately, I think he'll be the one to get it done first on the board.
Okay. All right. I'm going to go a different direction than what we were talking about pre-show here. I was considering and debating going back and forth with maybe the running backs, but we're going to go with I'm still thinking about it, actually. I was going to go with receiver, but do I want to go with even a crazier one? No, we'll stick with, I'll say Johnny Wilson. I'm going to say Mormon Missile to Johnny Wilson, first touchdown score. That's extremely far out there. I'm just going to recommend to everyone, do not take that bet. I mentioned earlier in this video, if you want anything, if you're just itching for something to take, please gamble responsibly, but take the contract incentive picks with Mike Evans, Cortland Sutton, and Geno Smith. That's a much better pick and bet, but there you go.
Well, I'll just throw a couple more names out there just because we love helping. We love helping the people, but yes, it is worth noting in my prep for the show, because even though it's a meaningless game, I still prep for it. Tanner McKee did have a pretty good connection with E.J. Jenkins during the preseason, so that's one to keep an eye on because he could be their number 1 tight end depending on what they do with Grant Calcaterra. And then he also had a 2-point conversion pass to Aniyah Smith, who seems like he might be the third receiver.
That was who either I go Johnny Wilson or I go Aniyah Smith. Yeah. So maybe so.
I think maybe if you want to put like an anytime touchdown, you could throw those guys on there. Who knows? I'm not like Josh said, gamble responsibly, but those are probably going to be the main targets out there. And we saw Tanner McKee slinging it last week, so I'm sure he'll pass 30+ times. So we'll see what happens.
That he did, yes. But especially this game of all games, gamble responsibly, be smart, people. We got the playoffs coming up next. It's more realistic, save it for that. But nonetheless, appreciate you coming on. The best as always. But safe travels to you. Going to be awesome to follow along as far as following the game and covering it there. And like I said, again, totally well deserved, but super happy for you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Like Josh said, I'll be sharing everything. I'll be in the locker room sharing videos, whatnot, and then some articles to come after that. So I'm really excited. Thank you, everybody, for the support all along. Thank you, Josh, for the support. And hopefully this is only just the beginning.
Heck yeah. There we go. All right, everybody. We appreciate it. As always, let us know your thoughts in the comments. We got some other crazy giveaways as well coming up, so stay tuned for that. Getting close to 100,000 subscribers, which is absolutely nuts for the channel, but a little less, or I guess almost a little less than like 7,000 subscribers. So I don't even know what to say to that other than thank you. Happy New Year to everybody. Let's start this thing out with the right way. And actually, again, as Anthony said, an Eagles loss would be better because you hurt the Giants. So, but let us know your score predictions, and best of luck to you. As always, you know what it is. Go Birds.